Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, I think I'm going to start. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. I'm Osama bin Murshid, professor in the history department, but also the director of the Center for Contemporary Arab Studies. And it's my great pleasure to introduce Professor Ibrahim Oweiss, who is a professor emeritus here at Georgetown, but his teaching career spans almost exactly 5 decades, from 1961 to 2009. And during this time, Professor Oweiss also taught at Harvard, Johns Hopkins, and Minnesota. And when he did take leave from academia, it was to serve in such distinguished capacities as first Undersecretary for Economic Affairs in the Egyptian cabinet, or as chief of the Egyptian Economic Mission to the United States with the rank of ambassador. Dr. Oweiss was born in Egypt, but he earned his graduate degrees in the United States, and he is the recipient of Egypt's Order of Merit, first class. But more importantly for our field, he's also the author of over 60 scholarly publications, including Petrodollar Surpluses, Arab Civilization, The Political Economy of Contemporary Egypt, The Arab Gulf Economies, Challenges and Prospects, and finally, among this group of books, A View on Islamic Economic Thought. Now, I was, as some of you may know, in 1974, Professor Oweiss coined the terms petrodollar and hostage capital. And he first presented his findings on the famous Oweiss demand curve for oil at Oxford University in 1982. And I'm happy to report that there's actually a website that tries to explain this very mean-looking curve, or at least the equation behind it for trying to understand prices, increase and decrease in prices, in oil prices. We are very honored and pleased today to host this event in celebration of Dr. Oweiss's distinguished career and service to Georgetown University in general, and to the field of Middle Eastern and North African studies in particular. And on this specific occasion, we're very pleased to announce and commemorate, celebrate the occasion of the release of his autobiography, A Tale of Two Cultures, which is, as you probably know, available for sale right outside these doors. Now, I have a review of the book, a very brief review by Carol Lancaster, who is the Dean of the School of Foreign Service. She commented that Professor Oweiss' autobiography recounts in clear prose the story of an active and productive life lived largely in 2 different cultures, Egyptian, Middle Eastern, and American. The reader will meet many interesting personages, well-known and not well-known, across 7 decades of important changes in the world. Ibrahim Oweiss, she concludes, has lived quite a life. And today we will have the pleasure and the opportunity to hear just how exceptional this life has been and continues to be. And I, for one, am really looking forward to his talk. So please join me in welcoming our most esteemed colleague, Professor Ibrahim Oweiss. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this kind introduction. When people get older, they get more sensitive, as if they go back to childhood, with almost tears in my eyes when I hear good things about me. But I really appreciate your kindness. I am really proud to have this particular book signing at the Center for Contemporary Arab Studies. I'm proud to have been one of its 3 founders, Peter Crow, Hisham Sharami, and I. We'll never forget the days we had to go through in order to be able to have this center. Now this center is known worldwide, and I'm very proud of this fact. The story of the center is also in the book. There are several people here that I don't want to identify each one of them, but let me start with the publisher of the book, Dr. Anna Lawton. She had read the manuscript earlier, and we appreciate very much your thoughtfulness. I never really met her before, even though she teaches at Georgetown. But when she saw the picture of my family in the Oval Office when Bill Clinton had the special function for me, and she saw the picture of my son there, and she told me, I think your son was one of my students, and it happened to be that way. The coincidence of this, the whole book was in a flash, and he was the one who drove me to where she resides in order to leave that flash for her. So I appreciate, Anna, for all what you have done for the book. I know it's a long process, but it came out. I also want to tell you that, or to reveal a secret, it was published around my 80th birthday. So. I'm glad I'm still walking and talking, lecturing and traveling. I never stop. In fact, I am busy as ever in this regard. I also would like to recognize here my family. Celine, my wife, is right there. And Mark Burns, my son-in-law, Dr. Mark Burns. Yasmin will be there, my daughter, but I think she had to. She had to attend to her 2-year-old son, Kieran. Maybe she will be on her way. Also, my daughter-in-law, Julia, who was a valedictorian of her class in 2002 from Georgetown. She will be coming also. She has not arrived yet. My son, Kareem, is the director of operations at Africa Center for Strategic Studies. He has a major conference, and he's 31 years old, and he organizes conferences for heads of states and things of the sort. Amazing, but he cannot make it, but his spirit is with us. I have one daughter and one son, and I'm proud to have 2 grandchildren. Ashleen, she will be 5 in few days on November 18. She had already wrapped me around her little finger. When I was away, at the minute I came back, she said, I missed you, Grandpapa. She's so wonderful. So that's my family. And also, I would like to recognize my sister, Fatma Oweiss, right here. She's a teacher of Arabic. And all of my colleagues here, all my friends, several friends here, they're only, I'm sorry? Here is Julia, and here is Yasmin. We just talked about you, both of you. It is really, the book is, but before I start that, also I would like to recognize the person who had been instrumental of being hired at Georgetown. I came to give a conference from Minnesota, and as he explained it, I was completely wrapped up in very heavy coat and earmuffs, and coming from Minnesota to that event. You'll never forget that. Ed Murphy, my old colleague, right here. The only one who had been older than I as far as being at Georgetown were two, Ed Murphy and who else here? Oh, yes. My dear friend, the professor of French at Georgetown University. I'm delighted that you could come. I think you came in 64 or 66? 66. I came in 67, 1 year ahead of me. The good old days when we used to eat at the tombs. Roger Bensky has always been excited and exciting. Exciting in new concepts and also at the same time very innovative in theater. He loves theater, and we'll never forget the days that we had been at association with. And his wife, Danielle, is a superb sculpturist that if you go to some of the areas here in Washington, D.C., there was a building that used to be a hospital for women. Now it's no longer. Right in front of that, there's a big sculpture there. I don't know how you, small one like you, can come up with a big sculpture like this. Very innovative and very creative. The creativity that I will never forget. The book that I wrote, in fact, is a celebration of my life. Usually, a celebration of one's life is done after his death. But I thought that I would share that with you while I'm still alive. And every word that I wrote in the book was as it happened at the moment. Even though when I was a teenager and I fell in love with one of the girls in our neighborhood, 3 years younger than I wrote that. I wrote that as it was. And in a society which is extremely strict, and there was no dating whatsoever in any way or fashion. But I wrote it as it was, as if it happened only yesterday. Anna Lorton was very interested in having the book published because she saw something in it. And I'm delighted that I was able to do that. And after, for some of you that have the book, after you read it, I would be delighted to speak to them after they read, to get their insights in preparation for the second printing of the book. I put a particular chapter on about Georgetown because Georgetown played a very important role in my life. I've been associated with it since 1967. When I walked in a class in the spring semester of '68, there was a young man by the name of William Jefferson Clinton, who became the President of the United States later on. I had never thought of that. But we had such a rapport ever since. I was extremely moved a few days ago, on the 28th of October. There was a celebration for his presidency at Georgetown, at Gaston Hall, full of people. He paid tribute to me in such a way that was so moving, and everybody stood up in applauding along with the president, former president. I was extremely touched by him. He's such a good human being that he had never forgotten a former teacher of his that had a lasting effect on him. In fact, at the Oval Office, before he left, he had a special meeting special celebration at the Oval Office of all of my family, my wife, my son, and my daughter, or my wife, my daughter, and my son, in the proper order. He talked about my impact on him. And he said that the idea of free trade was born in my class. And he had been convinced ever since of that time. But then he quipped at the end by saying, if you like the status of the American economy, you can now contribute to Dr. Oweiss's retirement fund. He has such a wonderful, wonderful sense of humor and a great order. I'm also delighted to have in the presence here Prince Ermias Sahil Selassie, the grandson of Emperor Haile Selassie of Ethiopia, that I had the pleasure of meeting several years ago. And he is now entitled to the throne of Ethiopia, if it happens. Thank you, Prince Ermias, for coming. I don't want to name everybody here. I know some, but I really appreciate all of you coming to this particular event, and I hope you will enjoy the book I wrote in as much as I enjoyed writing it. Thank you. Oh, yes, that's fine.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Oweiss. I'd like to just open the floor for questions, so you can maybe ask some questions directly to Professor Oweiss. Go ahead, sir.
Professor Oweiss, my name is Joe Slovnik. I talked to you once about Hussein Hassuna, and he had written a good book about his father's career, where Emperor Haile Selassie of Ethiopia and King Idris of Libya tried to mediate peace between Algeria and Morocco. I just wanted to do a comment on your friendship with Hussein Hassuna and Amr Moussa and the future of democracy in Egypt.
There is one item that I wanted actually to address before I answer this question, that in the celebration of this book, I was so delighted to find that my wife bought a new dress for it. It's right there. Not only my wife, but also a very wonderful colleague and friend of ours, Catherine Laurence, also bought a new suit right there, you see.
In your honor,
Now, as far as what happened in Egypt on the 25th of January, following what happened in Tunisia, is a remarkable, remarkable event that nobody would have ever thought that such pharaoh will be deposed, such dictator will be removed, such corrupt regime could be removed. They bought that regime. Every single person who was willing to sell his soul in order to preserve the system. It was so well entrenched. The police managed to keep all other people, all opposing people, silent or in jails. So it was impossible to imagine that something of the sort would happen. In fact, I finished the book just before the revolution. And then when it happened, Anna suggested that I would add the first chapter, which I did in the book, about the situation in Egypt. Nowadays, all what we see are negatives. But in my opinion, the positives are much greater than the negatives in the long run. It's going to take some time. The French Revolution did not achieve its goals of equality, fraternity, and so on and so forth until many years later on. The Egyptian revolution will be much faster in transforming into democracy simply because of the communication. It's very easy now to communicate through Facebook and others. It was Aristotle who said that the real democracy is when every person running for an office can speak to all the constituents. Nowadays, it can be done through the new generation. I actually give a description of a new generation. It is a generation like this. With the Facebook and with, so I think it is going to happen much faster. And there is, of course, a fear that the military would not leave power. It's also, there is a fear of an extreme Islamic sect that I have never heard of even when I was in Egypt or growing up in Egypt. It's called Salafis. This is something new. The Salafis were known in North Africa, but not in Egypt. So they could be that some sort of cooperation between the Salafis and the military. And this will create problems, but the Egyptian people are determined to have or to fulfill the goal of democracy and never again to be left out in the dark, left out with a corrupt regime, left out with an absolute dictatorship. As Shakespeare had said, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, and this is what had happened in Egypt. Thank you.
To coax you out of your shyness, we brought a microphone to preserve your words for posterity. So if you,
okay. Do I need to like right?
We're recording.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, thank you so much, Professor Oweiss. I mean, it really is, an honor to be at the same institution with you. I'm going to ask a question about the book, And I very much liked and was moved by your beautiful description at the beginning, towards the beginning of the book, of the neighborhood that you lived in, your house, your neighbors, and the period before you came to the United States and sailed across the ocean and landed here. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about Alexandria at the time, as you remember it, and some of and the major kind of changes that have taken place. It's a huge question, I know, but that have taken place in the country and in the city over that period. Thank you.
Egypt had lost a lot with the military coup of Nasser in 1952. At that time, it was 1952, in fact, just before the revolution, when I graduated from King Farouk University, which was renamed as Alexandria University afterwards. The Egyptian pound was higher than the British pound. England was indebted to Egypt by more than 500 million sterling pounds at that time. The level of education was completely different from what it turned out to be after 6 years of rule of the military. My external examiner, while I was in the branch of economics and political science, was from Oxford University. We had almost the same level at that time. The neighborhood in Alexandria, in which I had lived, was very cosmopolitan. We had a Jewish neighbor, Mr. Faber. Fatma can probably remember him. You were very young. Mr. Faber was given the name, the British name, in order to escape the problems of anti-Semitism. He came to Alexandria and he was always well-dressed for a 5 o'clock tea in the veranda next to us as we were walking, and he was always inviting me to speak about art and literature, even rugs. He was the first one to show me how to find the value of rugs. Opposite to that was Madame Nina. Madame Nina was Greek, married to a wealthy Egyptian, and she always could never, ever leave the chance to talk, and always give me some of her insights and some of the experiences of the country from where she came. There was in Alexandria a huge Greek community. In fact, there was a street in Ibrahimia where you hear nothing but Greek. And there was a movie theater there, Gete, that I used to go to because they used to always to have double features. And the coffee shops, the restaurants, the famous places that had been recorded much more eloquently than I did in the famous book, The Alexandria Quartet, by Lawrence Darrell. Lawrence Darrell was so moved about Alexandria at that time. In fact, Dr. Shahada, I must tell you that we had regressed so much as a result of the coup, of the military coup of 1952 of Nasser. Now it's time to catch up again.
Yeah, I have time for one more question.
Yeah, she wants to ask you a question. Yeah.
We have the mic.
Thanks everybody for coming here for Dr. Ibrahim Oweiss. And I'm glad to be here. Miss Fatma Oweiss, she invited me for that. I really appreciate. And I'm asking about some words you said about Alexandria. Can we hear that, please? It was a long time.
Poet?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, unfortunately, if I translate it in English, it will lose a lot of its flavor. So, no. But how many of you here would understand this? I will just say a couple of verses. رفلت عروس البحر في آلائها وبدت كعين الحور وقت صفائها ورأيتها تختال في خطراتها واليم أزرق ساحر كسمائها والليل ينظر نحوها في بهجة أضحى كفجر مشرق بضيائها ونجومه ثقب يلوح خلالها عين الملائكة ازدهت لهنائها. There is a story behind this particular poem. A very famous man known in the field of literature by the name of Taha Hussein. Taha Hussein was a blind man. He became blind in his early age. But this man had an incredible mind. He got his degree. He traveled to France. He got a doctorate degree. He married a French lady who was his eyes, who would look at something and to explain to him. Taha Hussein was the man that you could have really won the Nobel Prize in literature in every respect. His impossible way of writing with simplicity. It is the simplicity that makes it so beautiful. Taha Hussein was a minister when I was 19 years old, Minister of Education. And he came to Alexandria. The president of the university was told about the young poet at the university. So he asked me to come to meet with him and to prepare a poem and to read it before Taha Hussein. I read the poem to him, and I want to tell you that when I was growing up, I was extremely frail, very, very thin. That is why I never excelled in sports. So I devoted all of my time to reading. I read almost all of the classics that I can get a hold on in whatever language, but translations, if it is in Russian, I read lots of Russian Russian plays and Russian novels at the time, as well as Goethe from Germany, Gita from Germany, and also I memorized huge parts of Shakespeare's at that time. So I was so much interested in literature. I don't know what happened to me that I went through. I didn't go into that direction, but I went into economics and political science just to have my luck to meet Ed Murphy later on as an economist. So after I finished my poem, he asked me to, with his hand there, to come to meet with him. I went to where he was. He stood up, and then he started touching me up here like this, and my face. And he said, exactly the way I imagined you to be, a thin person. It was incredible ability to have a vision without sight. I will never forget that. And he was a great literary figure in Egypt and in the Arab world.
Thank you all. You know, we have many events in this room, and it's very rare for me to say that there's a family quality to a gathering. But I want to thank you all for making it feel like a big family event. I want to thank Professor Ibrahim Oweiss, his friends and family for making it so, and for giving us the occasion to mark the publication of your autobiography. So, thank you very much. El Beit Beitak. Thank you.